When have you said that's not my name? My boyfriend's little sister pulled me aside at his birthday dinner and whispered, "Did you know he calls you Melanie when you're not around?" My heart dropped. I'm Guatemalan, and my name is Melanith. It hurt so much more because when I moved to America, my grandmother told me I had to blend in with the white people, and forced me to erase everything about myself. He knows my name is the only connection to my country I have left. I guess Caitlin, his sister, must have seen the confusion on my face because she showed me a screenshot from their family group chat. Him. Melanie's coming to the game tomorrow. Caitlin. Isn't her name Melanith? Him. Dude, whatever. You know what I meant, lol. I thanked her for telling me and went home early. That night in bed, I decided to test him. Someone called me Melanie today at work. Hunter shot up like I'd slapped him. Who? I hate when people do that. Your name is beautiful, Melanith. His voice cracked with genuine anger. I wanted to believe him, but Caitlin's screenshot kept flashing in my mind. As soon as he was asleep, I sweeped through that man's phone, and I found nothing. No mention of Melanie anywhere. The message Caitlin showed me didn't even exist. I wanted to confront Caitlin directly, but I knew she had BPD and I'd seen the scars on her wrists from the last time someone challenged her lies. And on Sunday dinner at his parents' house, his mom pulled me into the kitchen. "Melanith, mi amor, help me with the salad." She matched my smile back and said, "Hunter made us all practice your name before you first came over. He said anyone who couldn't say it right wouldn't get to meet you." Enough was enough. The next morning, I brought it up to Hunter over morning coffee. "Hey, so your sister told me..." Ding. I was immediately interrupted by the sound of the front doorbell. I opened the door and saw Caitlin. I came with muffins for my favorite couple. As she set them down, she added casually, "I'm so protective of Hunter. His ex even called me obsessive once." She laughed. 2 weeks later, she broke up with him and moved 3 states away. All it took was a few words. I couldn't tell if she was opening up or threatening me. And at work, I swear I saw her in the parking garage. But when I turned around to face it, nothing was there. I kept it to myself because I didn't want Hunter to think I was going crazy. But that night, everything changed. As we lay in bed discussing our future, he whispered, "I can't wait to marry you. Have a little Melanith running around." It was the only time we'd talked about marriage, whispered in the dark. So imagine my shock the next day at his family reunion when Caitlin cornered us by the potato salad. "So are you guys thinking about marriage? You would be so cute together." I immediately jolted my head towards Hunter, who looked even more confused than me. "Why do you say that?" I asked, trying my best to sound casual. You know, I've been watching 90 Day Fiancé on Netflix and it's been, making me think of weddings. 90 Day Fiancé has never been on Netflix. Caitlin was stressing me out so much that 2 weeks later, my period was late. I took 5 pregnancy tests just to make sure my womb was empty, and that same evening, Caitlin stopped by. She'd never hugged me before, but suddenly her arms were suspiciously around me, and her hands lingered on my belly. Before I could say anything, she was in our kitchen, pouring red wine into a glass. "Cheers to the happy couple." "Caitlin, it's really late." "Oh, I see," she interrupted me. "If you don't want any wine, that's okay. Is there a specific reason you don't want any, though? Anything you need to tell me?" She held my gaze for a moment too long before excusing herself to the bathroom. The second the door clicked shut, I turned to Hunter. "This is insane. She's crossing every boundary we have. The wine thing? She's implying I'm pregnant. How the hell does she even know to ask that?" Hunter's face crumpled with guilt. I know. I'm so sorry. It's just..." He ran his hands through his hair. "She doesn't really have friends, Melanith. I think she just wants you to like her, to be close with you." I stopped listening after that, because in the corner of the room was my purse. The same purse I distinctly remember hanging by the front door. I walked over and my hands fingered my keychain comfort toy, the one Caitlin had given me for my birthday. Something glinted in the stuffed bear's eye. I angled it toward the light, and there it was. A tiny lens where the bear's eye should be. Everything clicked. She'd been watching everything. Suddenly, the bathroom door opened and Caitlin walked out. "Is everything okay in here?" I shoved the bear keychain deep into my pocket and turned around with what I hoped looked like a normal smile. Caitlin was standing there with her head tilted, waiting for an answer, and I could feel the weight of the camera pressing against my leg, like it was burning through the fabric. I managed to get words out even though my throat felt tight. I told her I was just really tired and needed to get to bed early because work had been crazy this week. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded and said she understood, then launched into a story about her own job stress that I barely heard because my brain was screaming at me to stay calm and act normal. She kept talking for what felt like forever, going on about her manager and some project deadline, and I nodded along like I was listening, even though all I could think about was the camera and how long she'd been watching me. My heart was beating so hard I was sure she could see it through my shirt. Finally, she said she should probably get going, and I felt a tiny bit of relief until she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me in a hug. Her hands moved down my sides during the hug, and I swear I felt them brush near my pocket where the bear was hidden. I froze completely, but tried to make it look like I was just hugging her back. She pulled away and smiled at me, told Hunter she'd see him later, and headed for the door. I walked her out because that's what a normal person would do. Said goodbye, watched her get in her car, and drive away. The second the door clicked shut behind me, I felt my legs give out, and I actually had to sit down right there on the floor in the entryway. I put my head between my knees and tried to breathe normally. but my whole body was shaking. Hunter came around the corner from the living room and saw me sitting on the floor. He asked if I was okay and crouched down next to me looking worried. I knew right then that I couldn't just blurt everything out. Not yet. Not when I didn't fully understand what I was dealing with or have any proof beyond the camera itself. I told him I was fine, just really exhausted from work and all the stress lately. He bought it way too easily, just nodded and said I should get some rest, offered to make me tea. Part of me felt relieved he believed me, but another part felt hurt that he couldn't tell something major had just happened. He helped me up off the floor and I went straight to the bedroom, told him I was going to lie down for a bit. I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed with the bear keychain in my hands, staring at that tiny lens in the bear's eye. My mind was racing through everything, every weird coincidence, every time Caitlin had shown up unexpectedly or known things she shouldn't have known. I waited until I heard Hunter turn on the TV in the living room. Then I grabbed my phone and went into the bathroom. I locked the door and sat on the edge of the tub, pulling up my texts. Ada from work was the only person I could trust right now who wasn't connected to Hunter's family at all. I typed out a message asking if we could talk privately tomorrow during lunch about something serious and urgent. I kept it vague because I didn't want to put anything specific in writing yet, but I made sure she knew it was important. She texted back within 2 minutes saying of course, asking if I was okay. I told her I would explain everything tomorrow and thanked her for being there. Before I could even think about sleeping, I knew I had to document everything while it was still fresh in my mind. I took my phone and photographed the bear keychain from every possible angle, making sure the tiny lens was clearly visible in the shots. The flash made it glint in a way that was obvious once you knew what you were looking for. I took at least 20 photos, zooming in on the lens, showing the whole bear, capturing every detail. Then I emailed all the photos to myself with timestamps in the subject line, so I'd have proof of when I found it. I opened my notes app and started writing down everything I could remember about when Caitlin gave me this bear. When I first noticed weird things happening, every single time she'd shown up unexpectedly, or said something that didn't make sense. The list got longer and longer as I typed, and seeing it all written out like that made the pattern impossible to ignore. I wrote down the pregnancy test thing, the marriage comment at the family reunion, seeing her in the parking garage at work, all of it. My hands were shaking so bad I kept making typos, but I didn't care. I just needed to get it all down before I forgot any details. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Caitlin watching me through that camera, seeing everything I did in my own home. The next morning at work, I was a complete mess. I kept checking my purse every few minutes to make sure the bear was still in there, like it might somehow disappear or someone might take it. Every time someone walked past my desk, I jumped and tensed up, which was ridiculous because Caitlin didn't even know where I worked. Or at least I didn't think she did, but now I wasn't sure what she knew and didn't know. My boss walked by around 10 and paused at my desk, asked if everything was all right because I seemed distracted. I told her I was fine, just dealing with some personal stuff, and she nodded and moved on. I felt bad for lying, but I couldn't exactly explain that my boyfriend's sister had been spying on me through a stuffed bear. At lunch, I met Ada at a coffee shop 3 blocks away from the office, a place neither of us usually went where we definitely wouldn't run into anyone from work. We grabbed a table in the back corner and I pulled out my phone before we even ordered drinks. I showed her the photos first, zooming in so she could see the lens clearly. Then I told her everything, starting from the beginning with the fake screenshot about my name, moving through all the boundary violations, the wine and pregnancy implications, and finally finding the camera. I talked fast and probably wasn't making complete sense, but I needed to get it all out. Ada didn't interrupt me once, just listened carefully with this serious expression on her face. When I finally finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She told me she believed me completely, and that what I was describing was not okay. It was actually really scary. Hearing someone else validate that I wasn't crazy or overreacting made me want to cry from pure relief. Ada pulled out her phone and started scrolling through her contacts. She said her cousin had dealt with a stalking situation last year, and there was this guy who worked in tech security who had helped her out. His name was Darius, and he knew all about hidden cameras and surveillance stuff. She texted him right there at the table, explaining briefly that her friend needed help with a potential surveillance device. He responded within minutes saying he could meet with me tomorrow during my lunch break if that worked. Having a concrete next step, an actual plan of action, made me feel less helpless and trapped. I wasn't just sitting around being scared anymore. I was doing something about it. That evening back at the apartment, I decided I couldn't confront Hunter yet. Not until I understood exactly what I was dealing with and had more information. I pulled out my phone and opened a new note. Started making a detailed list of every single time Caitlin had shown up unexpectedly over the past few months. Every gift she'd given me, every weird comment she'd made, every time she'd known something she shouldn't have known. The pattern was so obvious now that I was actively looking for it, that I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. She'd given me the bear for my birthday in March. The marriage comment at the reunion was in April. The pregnancy wine thing was just last week. All of it lined up with times when she would have been watching through the camera. I got up and started going through the apartment looking at the other things Caitlin had given me over the past few months. There was a decorative picture frame on the bookshelf that she'd brought over in February, a coffee mug with a cute saying about friendship that was sitting in the kitchen cabinet, a small plant in a ceramic pot on the windowsill that she'd insisted I take because she said it would brighten up the space. I took each item and examined it carefully under the bright overhead light, turning it over in my hands, looking for anything that seemed off or out of place. The frame seemed normal, just a regular wooden frame with our photo in it. The mug looked fine too, just ceramic with printing on the outside. But the plant pot made me pause because it was heavier than it should be for its size, and there was a small hole in the side that could have been a drainage hole, but also could have been something else. I set it aside to show Darius tomorrow along with the bear. I felt paranoid examining everything like this, but I also felt justified given what I'd already found. If she'd put a camera in one thing, who knew what else she might have done? I pulled out my phone and opened the text thread with Ada, typing quickly about needing to meet with her tech contact as soon as possible. She responded within minutes with Darius's number and a message saying she'd already texted him a heads up about my situation. I called him right away, my hands still shaking a little from examining all of Caitlin's gifts, and he picked up on the second ring. We set up a meeting for tomorrow at 12:30 at the public library near my office because he said it would be quiet and private there. After hanging up, I grabbed a notebook from my desk drawer and started writing down every question I could think of about the camera, like what it could record, how far it could see, whether it saved footage somewhere, and how to handle it without destroying evidence. Writing the questions made me feel less helpless, like I was actually doing something instead of just freaking out. That night I couldn't sleep, my brain running through everything Caitlin might have seen over the past few months, so I got up around 2 a.m. and went into the bathroom. I stood there looking at myself in the mirror under the bright overhead light, and I started saying my name out loud. Melanith, Melanith, Melanith. My grandmother had tried so hard to make me erase it, to make me blend in and disappear into whiteness, and now Caitlin had been watching my most private moments, but my name was still mine. It felt like a small thing, but it made my chest feel less tight, made me feel like I still had something she couldn't take from me. I went back to bed and managed to sleep for a few hours before my alarm went off. The next morning, Hunter was making coffee in the kitchen when he turned to me with this hopeful smile and suggested we invite Caitlin over for dinner this weekend, saying it might be nice to spend time together as a family. I had to literally bite the inside of my cheek to stop myself from reacting, from yelling about how the last thing I wanted was her back in our apartment. Instead, I made up some excuse about having a big work project due and needing the whole weekend to focus on it. He looked disappointed, his face falling a little, but he said he understood and didn't push it. I felt guilty for lying to him when we usually told each other everything, but I kept reminding myself that I needed to protect myself first and figure out what I was dealing with before having that conversation. As I was getting ready to leave for work, I walked into the living room to grab my purse and stopped cold. It was sitting on the kitchen counter instead of hanging by the front door where I always put it. My skin started crawling as I realized Caitlin must have moved it last night when she went to the bathroom, must have touched my things and repositioned everything. I walked over and checked inside the purse, going through every pocket and compartment, but everything seemed normal and in its place. Still, the violation of knowing she'd gone through my stuff made the whole thing feel even more real, even more invasive than it already did. I grabbed the purse and got out of the apartment as fast as I could, needing to be anywhere else. At 12:30, I walked into the library and found the study room Darius had described, a small glass-walled space in the back corner. He was already there, a guy in his late 20s with glasses and a messenger bag, and he stood up to shake my hand when I came in. I pulled the bear keychain out of my purse and set it on the table between us, and he immediately pulled out this small magnifying tool from his bag and started examining it carefully. Within 2 minutes, he looked up at me and confirmed it was definitely a wireless camera, then turned the bear over to show me a tiny SD card slot I'd never noticed before. He explained it could either record locally to that card or stream to a phone app in real time, depending on how whoever installed it had set it up. My stomach dropped as he kept talking, explaining that the camera had probably been watching me for months, recording or streaming everything within about 15 feet of wherever I kept my purse. My bedroom when I hung the purse on my closet door, my bathroom when I set it on the counter, my kitchen when I left it on a chair. Everywhere I went in my own apartment, she'd been watching. Darius must have seen my face go pale because he quickly said we could figure out exactly what was captured and who had access to it, but I barely heard him over this ringing sound in my ears. He reached across the table and touched my arm gently, waiting until I focused on him again before continuing. He told me very clearly that I should not try to access the camera's feed or app myself, because it would alert whoever was monitoring it that I knew about the device. Instead, he suggested we document everything thoroughly, take detailed photos and notes about the device, and consider taking it to a forensics specialist who could examine it properly without tipping anyone off. He pulled out a small notebook and wrote down the make and model number of the camera, tearing out the page and handing it to me to keep as evidence. About 10 minutes later, Ada showed up, slipping into the study room and sitting down next to me. She listened as Darius finished explaining the technical details. Then she looked at me seriously and said, I should talk to a lawyer before confronting anyone, even Hunter. She pointed out that what Caitlin did might actually be illegal, like a real crime, and I should understand my options before deciding how to handle any of it. Darius nodded and said he'd be happy to write up a technical report about the device if I needed it for legal purposes, something official that explained what it was and what it could do. I thanked them both, feeling overwhelmed but also grateful that I had people helping me instead of dealing with this alone. Back at my desk that afternoon, I opened a private browser window and started searching for attorneys who handled privacy cases and surveillance issues. I found a firm downtown that offered free initial consultations, which was good because I had no idea how much this kind of thing cost. I called during my afternoon break, and the receptionist who answered was professional and calm, not making me feel weird or paranoid for asking about hidden cameras and privacy violations. She got me scheduled for an appointment on Friday afternoon, which was only 3 days away, and I felt a little better knowing I'd have legal advice soon. That evening at home, I waited until Hunter was in the shower. Then I carefully placed the bear keychain into a Ziploc bag and sealed it, trying not to touch it more than necessary. I hid the bag deep in my work laptop case, tucked between some folders and my charger, somewhere Hunter would never think to look or accidentally find it. Then I opened a new document on my laptop and started creating a detailed timeline of everything I could remember about Caitlin's behavior. I wrote down dates and times for every unexpected visit, every weird comment she'd made, every time she'd known something she shouldn't have known. The gift-giving started in March with the bear. The marriage comment at the reunion was in April. The pregnancy wine thing was just last week. I added the building security footage I still needed to request, Emilio's observations about her in the parking garage, the screenshots of her texts and social media posts. Writing it all down in one document made the pattern impossible to ignore, made it so clear and disturbing that I had to stop twice because my hands were shaking too much to type. But I kept going until I had everything documented, every single incident I could remember, because I knew I needed this evidence to protect myself and prove I wasn't making things up or overreacting to nothing. That evening when Hunter got home from work, he found me still at my laptop staring at the timeline document. He set down his bag and walked over, resting his hand on my shoulder. I could feel him looking at the screen, but I quickly minimized the window before he could read anything specific. He asked if I was okay, and I told him work had been really stressful lately, that my supervisor was pushing hard on some deadlines. The lie tasted wrong in my mouth, but I kept my face neutral and forced a tired smile. He believed me completely and offered to cook dinner so I could relax, which somehow made the guilt worse. I thanked him and closed my laptop, following him to the kitchen even though my stomach felt too tight to eat anything. We made small talk about his day while he chopped vegetables and I set the table, both of us pretending everything was normal. Around 11 p.m., I was getting ready for bed when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The text was from Caitlin asking if I was doing okay, because I had seemed really tired when she visited earlier. I stared at the timestamp showing 11:03 p.m. and felt my skin crawl at how late she was texting me. I immediately took a screenshot before even opening the message fully, then another one after I read it. My response was brief and polite, just saying I was fine and heading to bed soon. Every word I typed to her felt like I was building a case now, like I was a lawyer collecting proof instead of just having a normal conversation. I added both screenshots to the folder on my laptop labeled Work Projects 2024, which where I was keeping all the evidence about Caitlin. The next morning, while I was getting ready for work, I remembered something important. My apartment building had a security camera pointed right at the main entrance, one of those dome cameras that recorded everyone coming and going. I wondered if it had caught Caitlin showing up at weird times, maybe times when she told Hunter she was somewhere else. I left for work 15 minutes early and stopped by the building office on my way out. The manager was sorting through mail and looked up when I walked in. I explained that I thought someone might have been messing with my packages and asked if I could request footage from the past month to check. He said it would take 3 to 5 business days to pull all those recordings, but he could definitely do it. I thanked him and filled out a simple request form, making sure to write down the specific dates I remembered Caitlin visiting. At work that day, I could barely focus on anything. I kept staring at my computer screen trying to work on a spreadsheet, but my mind was replaying everything over and over. Around 2 p.m., my supervisor stopped by my desk and pointed out that I had entered the wrong formulas in an entire column, messing up calculations for the whole project. I apologized and said I would fix it right away, feeling my face get hot with embarrassment. During my afternoon break, Ada found me in the break room looking stressed and pulled me aside to the empty conference room. She reminded me that what I was dealing with was really serious, and it was completely normal to be distracted. She told me to be gentle with myself instead of beating myself up for not being perfect at work right now. Her kindness almost made me cry because I had spent the whole day feeling like I was failing at everything. That evening, I was scrolling through Instagram while Hunter watched TV and saw that Caitlin had posted a story. It was just a quote on a plain background that said something about protecting the people you love no matter what. There was no other context, no explanation, just that vague quote sitting there. I took a screenshot immediately and added it to my evidence folder. The post felt like a message, but I couldn't tell if she somehow knew I had found the camera or if this was just her usual dramatic social media behavior. About an hour later, my phone buzzed with a text from Hunter's mom asking if I wanted to meet her for lunch next week. She wrote part of the message in Spanish, asking how I was doing and saying she missed seeing me. The warmth in her words made my chest feel tight because his family had been so welcoming to me, and now this whole situation with Caitlin was threatening to destroy all of that. I texted back accepting the lunch invitation because I genuinely liked her and thought maybe she could help me understand Caitlin better, or at least give me some perspective on the family dynamics. The next day at work, the building manager emailed me saying the footage request was processed and should be ready by early next week. Just knowing I would soon have video evidence of Caitlin's comings and goings made me feel more prepared, like I was actually building a real case instead of just being scared and paranoid. I forwarded the email to my personal account as a backup, then saved it in 3 different places because I was terrified of losing any evidence. Friday afternoon, I took a half day off work and drove downtown to meet with Joan at her law office. I brought a folder with printed copies of everything. My whole timeline with dates and times, the photos of the bear camera from every angle, the technical notes Darius had written about the device, and screenshots of all Caitlin's texts and Instagram posts. Joan sat across from me at her desk and went through each page carefully, making notes and asking specific questions about when things happened. After about 20 minutes, she looked up and told me directly that what Caitlin did was absolutely a violation of privacy laws in our state. She explained I potentially had grounds for criminal charges and also for a civil lawsuit if I wanted to pursue that. Joan walked me through all my options one by one. I could file a police report to create an official record. I could request a protective order that would legally require Caitlin to stay away from me. I could send a cease and desist letter as a formal warning. She stressed that courts really like to see that someone tried to resolve things directly before escalating to legal action, so I should document any boundary setting I did with Caitlin before going straight to police. She also warned me that involving police when someone has mental health issues can get complicated and messy, but that didn't mean I shouldn't protect myself. I left her office feeling both empowered and overwhelmed, clutching the folder of evidence against my chest. That evening, I sat down at my laptop and opened a new text message to Caitlin. I typed out that I needed her to stop making visits without calling first, to please ask before giving me any more gifts, and to give me some space to focus on my relationship with Hunter. I read the message over about 20 times, changing words and rephrasing things, trying to make it firm and clear, but not cruel or aggressive. Finally, around 9 p.m., I closed my eyes and hit send before I could second-guess myself again. My phone buzzed less than 5 minutes later. I watched the screen light up with Caitlin's name and felt my stomach drop. The first message said she was so hurt that I would push her away like this when she was just trying to be a good friend and sister. The second message came 30 seconds later saying she understood I needed space and she would respect that. Then a third message asking what she did wrong and if this was about something specific. I took screenshots of each message as they came in, my hands moving on autopilot while my brain tried to process how quickly she was cycling through different emotional tactics. Another message popped up saying she thought we were becoming close and she valued our friendship so much. I added each screenshot to the folder on my phone labeled evidence and turned off my notifications so I wouldn't see if more came through. Hunter walked into the living room and stopped when he saw me sitting on the couch staring at my phone with what must have been a pretty stressed look on my face. He asked what was wrong and I realized I couldn't keep putting this off anymore. I told him we needed to have a serious talk and asked him to please sit down. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone as I pulled up the photos of the bear camera. I showed him the pictures first, zooming in so he could see the tiny lens clearly visible in the stuffed animal's eye. Then I walked him through my whole timeline of Caitlin's behavior, starting with the fake screenshot about my name and going all the way through to finding the camera. I explained how she knew about the pregnancy tests, about our private marriage conversation, about things she shouldn't have known unless she was watching or listening somehow. Hunter stared at the photos on my phone for what felt like forever without saying anything. I could see his face going through different expressions as he tried to process what this meant about his sister. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, and he said he was horrified and angry that she would do this to me. But then he asked if he could talk to Caitlin first before we got police or lawyers involved, because she was his sister, and he was really worried about how she would react if we went straight to authorities. I felt something hot and sharp in my chest when he said that. We spent the next 2 hours talking through what to do next, and it turned into the first real fight we'd ever had as a couple. I got why he was worried about Caitlin's mental health, but I was so mad that he was asking me to wait when I was the one who got violated. I told him I'd been watched in my own home for months, in my bedroom and bathroom, and he wanted me to just pause while he tried to handle it gently with his sister. He said he wasn't asking me to do nothing, just to let him try talking to her first. We went back and forth for a while until we finally reached a compromise on some immediate safety steps we could take right away. We agreed to change our locks so Caitlin couldn't get in anymore, to tell her clearly she wasn't allowed to visit without calling first, and to secure anything private or valuable in our apartment. Hunter promised that if Caitlin didn't respect the boundaries, or if anything else happened at all, we would go straight to the police with no more delays. We also agreed to be completely honest with each other going forward, and to make decisions together as a couple, instead of him trying to protect his sister while I tried to protect myself. It wasn't the perfect solution I wanted, but at least it felt like we were on the same team now, instead of pulling in different directions. The next morning, a locksmith showed up at our apartment and installed brand new locks on our door. I made it clear that only Hunter and I would have keys besides the building manager, no spare for family members or anyone else. While the locksmith was finishing up, Hunter called Caitlin and told her about the new lock policy, and that she needed to call before visiting from now on. I could hear her crying through the phone from across the room, but Hunter stayed firm with the boundary he was setting. Hearing him actually hold that line with her made me feel more confident that we could handle this together. After the locksmith left, I ordered a basic security camera from Amazon that pointed at our front door and sent motion alerts to both our phones. It wasn't fancy, but knowing I would have a record of anyone who approached our apartment made me feel safer. Hunter helped me install it that afternoon and mount it in the right spot, and he didn't complain about the cost, even though we hadn't budgeted for it. That evening, Hunter said he wanted to meet Caitlin at a coffee shop to talk to her privately about everything that happened. I told him I would stay home because I wasn't ready to face her yet, and honestly wasn't sure I could trust myself not to lose my temper and make things worse. He left around 6, and I spent the next 3 hours cleaning the apartment like a crazy person, scrubbing counters that were already clean, and organizing drawers that didn't need it. I kept checking my phone every few minutes to see if Hunter had texted, but there was nothing. When he finally came home after 9, it had been almost 3 hours, and he looked completely exhausted. He sat down on the couch and told me that Caitlin denied everything at first, saying she had no idea what he was talking about with any camera. Then she started crying and said she was just trying to look out for me and make sure I was good enough for him. After that, she got angry and accused him of choosing me over his own family. He said he wasn't sure what to believe about her real intentions, but he had told her very clearly that the camera was absolutely not okay, and she needed to respect our boundaries going forward. I felt frustrated that he was still giving her the benefit of the doubt about her intentions when the evidence was right there in front of us. But I could also see how hard this was for him, having to choose between supporting me and protecting his sister. Hunter admitted that he asked Caitlin if there was any other proof besides the camera itself, like an app or device that would show it was connected to her phone. She denied having anything like that and said maybe someone else put the camera there to frame her. He seemed really torn between believing her story and believing what I was telling him, which hurt even though I understood family loyalty was complicated. I reminded him that we would know more once the building security footage came in, and once Darius could do the full technical analysis of the camera device. The next morning, my phone rang while I was getting ready for work, and Darius's name popped up on the screen. I answered quickly, and he told me he'd been researching the camera model online late into the night. The manufacturer keeps logs of every device that gets paired with their cameras through the app, and a forensic specialist should be able to pull that data without alerting whoever might be watching. He gave me the name of a shop downtown that does this kind of technical work, and said he could come with me if I needed support. I wrote down the shop's information and thanked him for looking into it so thoroughly. As soon as I hung up with Darius, I called the forensics shop and explained my situation to the woman who answered. She told me they could create a complete copy of everything on the device without connecting to it, or tipping off anyone who might be monitoring the camera feed. The whole process would take a few days and cost $300, which felt totally worth it if it meant I could prove whose phone the camera was linked to. I scheduled an appointment to drop off the bear on Monday morning, and she gave me a case number to reference. Hunter's mom called me later that day about the lunch plans we'd made, and just hearing her warm voice made my eyes water a little. We agreed to meet at a small family restaurant she picked near her house, and when I walked in Saturday afternoon, she was already sitting in a corner booth. She stood up to hug me and immediately noticed something was off because she pulled back and looked at my face closely. I gave her a simple version of what was happening with Caitlin, leaving out some of the more disturbing details but being honest about the camera and the boundary violations. Her reaction surprised me because she didn't seem shocked at all, just sad and a little resigned. She started explaining that Caitlin has struggled with boundaries and getting too attached to people since she was really young, even as a small child. The family had tried to get her help over the years, but they'd also made excuses for her behavior sometimes, which she admitted wasn't helpful in the long run. She told me Hunter has always felt especially responsible for protecting Caitlin because he's her older brother, and he saw how much she struggled growing up. That helped me understand why he'd been so defensive and hesitant to believe the worst about his sister's actions. Then Hunter's mom looked me right in the eyes and said very clearly that what Caitlin did was completely wrong no matter what her mental health issues were, and that I had every right to protect myself and set whatever boundaries I needed. On Monday morning, the building manager called my cell to say the security footage I'd requested was ready for me to review. I went down to his office during my lunch break and he pulled up the video files on his computer screen. Sure enough, there was Caitlin clear as day walking into our building at 10 at night on a Tuesday from 2 weeks ago, the same night she'd told Hunter she was staying at a friend's place across town. The manager scrolled through more footage and we found 3 other times she'd come and gone at weird hours when she'd claimed to be somewhere else entirely. I asked him to save all of it to a USB drive for me and explained I was dealing with a difficult situation and might need the footage as evidence. He stayed professional about the whole thing and didn't pry into the details, just made me a copy and wrote in his log that I'd requested it. Before I left his office, I also mentioned that Caitlin was no longer welcome in the building without my direct permission, and he made a note of that in the system too. That same afternoon, I was walking through the lobby on my way back from getting the mail when my neighbor from down the hall stopped me. His name is Emilio, and we'd always been friendly in passing but never really talked much. He asked if everything was okay, and mentioned he'd noticed Hunter's sister hanging around the parking garage late at night a few times recently. He said she'd just been sitting in her car or walking around between the rows of vehicles, and it had struck him as strange behavior. I thanked him for telling me and asked if he'd be willing to write down what he saw with specific dates and times if he could remember them. He agreed right away and said he'd email me a statement by the end of the day. On Tuesday morning, Darius met me at the forensics shop like he'd promised, and we handed over the bear camera to the technician who worked there. She explained the entire process they'd used to image the device data, without connecting to any networks or alerting anyone monitoring it. She said the results should be ready by Friday afternoon and gave us both her direct number to call. Knowing I'd soon have solid proof of whose phone the camera was paired with made me feel relieved and anxious at the same time. That evening after work, I sat down at my laptop and composed a long email to Joan with all the new evidence I'd collected over the past few days. I attached screenshots of the building security footage showing Caitlin entering at odd hours, Emilio's written statement about seeing her in the parking garage, the intake paperwork from the forensics shop, and the latest batch of screenshots from Caitlin's messages and social media posts. Joan responded within an hour saying this new evidence made my case significantly stronger and that we should be ready to take legal action if Caitlin didn't comply with the boundaries we were setting. The next day at work, my supervisor asked me to come by HR for what she called a routine check-in. When I sat down across from her, she mentioned she'd noticed I seemed more stressed and distracted than usual lately. I decided to be honest and told her I was dealing with a difficult personal situation involving someone who'd violated my privacy. I asked if I could take a personal day next week for some legal appointments I needed to attend. She approved it right away without making me explain further, and said she wanted me to feel supported rather than worried about my job performance. When I got home that evening, Hunter was already making dinner and he asked me to sit down because he wanted to talk about everything. He said he understood how serious this was, but asked if we could give his family a little more time to handle things internally before we brought in lawyers or police. I felt my whole body tense up because I'd been patient for months while Caitlin violated my privacy, and now he wanted me to wait even longer. We went back and forth for almost an hour, and I could feel myself getting more frustrated with every minute that passed. Finally, we reached a compromise that I could live with. We agreed on a firm deadline where if Caitlin broke any boundaries at all, or if the forensics proved she was definitely monitoring me, then we'd take immediate legal action with no more delays or excuses. Hunter wrote it down on paper and we both signed it, which felt silly, but also made it feel more real and binding. The rest of the week dragged by so slowly, I thought I might lose my mind waiting for Friday to come. I kept checking my phone every few hours to see if the forensic shop had called early with results. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped thinking it might be them. Work was almost impossible to focus on because my brain kept running through all the possible outcomes and what I'd do depending on what they found. Friday afternoon finally arrived, and at 2:47 p.m. my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I stepped outside into the parking lot to take the call, and the forensics technician got right to the point without any small talk. The camera had been actively paired with a phone as recently as last week, and the device model matched the iPhone that Caitlin carries. She explained that they'd also found the camera had been recording to its internal storage for approximately 4 months, with footage automatically deleted after 30 days to make room for new recordings. 4 months. She'd been watching me for 4 entire months. I thanked her and ended the call, then just stood there in the parking lot staring at nothing while cars drove past me. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone twice while trying to pull up Joan's number. She answered on the second ring, and I told her the forensics results without even saying hello first. Joan said this was exactly the kind of concrete evidence we needed, and that she'd start drafting a formal cease and desist letter right away. She asked me to email her the forensics report and said she'd have a draft ready for me to review by the end of the day. I sent her the report from my phone right there in the parking lot, then went back inside to finish my workday, even though I couldn't concentrate on anything. Joan emailed me the draft letter at 6:23 p.m. and I read through it 3 times on my phone before I even left the office. The letter cited specific incidents with dates and times, the camera evidence, the forensics report proving it was Caitlin's phone, and the building security footage showing her unauthorized entries. It demanded that Caitlin stop all contact with me, stay away from my home and workplace, delete any recordings she had of me, and confirm in writing within 5 business days that she'd comply with everything. Reading it all laid out in formal legal language made the whole situation feel even more real and serious than it already did. When I got home, Hunter was waiting for me, and we sat down at the kitchen table to review the letter together. I watched his face while he read through each page, and I could see the exact moment when it really sank in for him how bad this was. The forensics proof that it was definitely Caitlin's phone connected to the camera removed any possible doubt he might have had left. He sat there quiet for a long time after he finished reading, just staring at the papers spread out on the table in front of us. Then he looked up at me and said he supported sending the letter, and would back me up completely with his family no matter what happened next. We spent the weekend preparing ourselves for whatever reaction the letter might cause. Hunter called his parents and gave them a heads up that we were taking legal action, but didn't go into all the details over the phone. His mom sounded worried, but said she understood we needed to protect ourselves. On Monday morning, we drove to the post office together and sent the cease and desist via certified mail to Caitlin's address, so we'd have proof she received it. Hunter also emailed her a copy from his personal email account so she couldn't claim she never got it. We went back home and I tried to do some work on my laptop while Hunter cleaned the apartment to keep himself busy. At 11:47 a.m., his phone started ringing and it was his mom calling. Hunter answered and immediately his face changed as he listened to whatever she was saying. He put the call on speaker and his mom explained that Caitlin had just shown up at their house crying and saying I was trying to destroy their family. She said Caitlin was having a complete breakdown and kept asking why everyone was turning against her. Within the next hour, Hunter got calls from his dad and 2 of his cousins, all wanting to know what was going on. Suddenly, the whole family was involved in getting pulled into the situation. His mom called back a second time, and I could hear the stress in her voice as she tried to mediate between supporting us and worrying about Caitlin's mental state. Hunter's dad sent him a long text message asking if we could all sit down and talk this through as a family before things escalated further. The stress and chaos of everyone calling and texting became too much for me to handle. I felt like I was drowning in other people's opinions and emotions when I was the one who'd been violated. I told Hunter I needed to stay at Ada's apartment for a few days to get some space and feel safe away from everything. He was at his parents' house trying to calm everyone down when I packed a bag with enough clothes and toiletries for almost a week. I left him a note on the kitchen counter saying I needed some time but that I loved him, and we'd figure this out together. I also wrote that I wasn't angry at him, but I needed to be somewhere that felt completely safe right now. Driving to Ada's place, I felt this weird mix of guilt for leaving and relief at getting away from the apartment where I'd been watched for so long. Being in a different space where Caitlin had never been and couldn't show up unexpectedly made me feel like I could finally breathe properly again. Ada had already set up her guest room for me and had bought my favorite snacks from the store. She didn't ask a million questions or try to give me advice, just let me exist in her space without any pressure. Hunter texted me around 9 p.m. saying he understood why I needed space and that he was sorry his family was making everything harder. He said he'd told his parents the full story with all the evidence and made it clear that Caitlin's behavior was completely unacceptable, regardless of her mental health struggles. He wrote that he'd asked them to stop calling and texting me and to give us both some room to breathe. His last message said he was on my side and asked me to be patient while he worked things out with his family, but promised he wouldn't let them pressure me into anything. I texted back a short response saying I appreciated him standing up for us and that I'd be ready to talk more in a day or two. The next morning, I woke up to a voicemail from Hunter's mom asking if I'd be willing to come to their house for a mediated conversation with everyone present. She said they all wanted to hear my side directly and work together to find a solution that protected everyone involved. I called Joan before responding to anyone and explained the situation. She walked me through exactly how to handle a family meeting like this. Stay calm, no matter what anyone says. Stick to facts instead of emotions. Don't get drawn into arguments about intentions or mental health, and have clear boundaries about what I needed going forward. She said I should agree to the meeting, but insist that she be available by phone if I needed legal guidance during the conversation. I called Hunter's mom back and told her I'd come to the meeting, but that my attorney would be on standby if needed. 2 days later, I drove to Hunter's parents' house with a folder containing copies of all my evidence. Hunter met me at the door and walked in with me holding my hand. We sat down in their living room, and I found myself across from Caitlin for the first time since I'd discovered the camera. Hunter's parents sat on either side of her, and Hunter sat next to me. I took out my evidence and started presenting everything calmly and clearly, just like Joan had advised. I showed them photos of the camera in the bare keychain with the lens visible. I explained the forensics report that proved it was paired with Caitlin's phone and had been recording for 4 months. I showed them the building security footage with timestamps of Caitlin entering at odd hours when she'd claimed to be somewhere else. I read Emilio's written statement about seeing her in the parking garage late at night. I walked them through my timeline of incidents with specific dates and examples. The whole time I focused on facts and what happened without attacking Caitlin's character or bringing up her mental health issues, even though I wanted to scream about how violated I felt. Caitlin's reaction kept changing every few minutes, like she couldn't decide which approach would work best. First, she started crying and said she was just trying to protect Hunter and make sure I was good enough for him. She said she'd seen him get hurt before and couldn't stand to watch it happen again. Then she switched to minimizing everything and said it wasn't that serious, and I was overreacting to something that wasn't a big deal. She claimed lots of people have security cameras, and this was basically the same thing. Hunter's dad interrupted her and said no, this was completely different, and she knew it. Then Caitlin shifted again and admitted vaguely that she'd gotten too attached to our relationship and made some mistakes in how she tried to be involved. But even with that admission, she never fully took responsibility for violating my privacy or acknowledged how wrong it was to secretly record me. She kept using phrases like things got out of hand and I didn't mean for it to go this far instead of actually apologizing or admitting what she'd done. Hunter's parents looked uncomfortable and kept glancing at each other while Caitlin talked. His mom reached over and put her hand on Caitlin's arm, but didn't say anything to excuse or defend her behavior this time. Hunter's dad cleared his throat and looked directly at me with this exhausted expression. He said they believed me completely, and that seeing everything documented like this was shocking and upsetting. His mom kept her hand on Caitlin's arm and told me she was so sorry they hadn't recognized how serious things had gotten, that they should have stepped in sooner when they noticed Caitlin crossing boundaries. They both agreed right there that Caitlin couldn't visit our apartment anymore and needed to stop all contact with me completely. Hunter's dad said they would make sure Caitlin started therapy immediately and would help us enforce whatever boundaries we needed. It wasn't perfect, and I could tell they were struggling with the reality of what their daughter had done, but hearing them actually support me instead of making excuses felt like more than I'd hoped for going into this meeting. The next morning, Joan met me at the police station downtown, and we filed an official report about everything that happened. I brought copies of all my evidence, and the officer who took our statement was this older guy who didn't make me feel stupid or dramatic for reporting it. He looked through the forensics report proving the camera was paired to Caitlin's phone and told me directly that what she did was definitely illegal under our state's surveillance laws. He explained that secretly recording someone in their private space without consent was a crime, and I had every right to pursue charges if I wanted to. For now, Joan and I decided to hold off on requesting a protective order to see if Caitlin would actually comply with the family's agreement, but having everything officially documented in a police report made me feel way more protected. The officer gave me a case number and said I could come back anytime if the situation escalated, or if I changed my mind about pressing charges. That evening, Hunter and I drove to Ada's apartment where I'd been staying and sat at her kitchen table to talk through everything we needed going forward. Ada made us coffee and gave us space while we worked on creating a written agreement about our relationship and boundaries. Hunter wrote down that he wouldn't share any details about our private life with Caitlin anymore, not even casual stuff about our plans or conversations. We agreed to have weekly check-ins where we'd both talk honestly about how we were feeling and whether we felt safe and respected. The most important part was writing down that if Caitlin violated any boundary even once, we would go straight to the police for a protective order with no more chances or family mediation. Hunter signed it and I signed it, and we both kept copies on our phones. Writing it all down and making it official between us made the agreement feel real and binding instead of just promises we might forget about later. The next day, Ada helped me move all my stuff back into our apartment, and we spent the whole afternoon securing my digital privacy. I changed every single password I had for email, social media, banking, everything. Ida showed me how to set up two-factor authentication on all my accounts, so even if someone had my password, they couldn't get in without my phone. I went through Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and removed Caitlin from my friends' lists and blocked her number in my phone. Each small action of taking back control over my own information felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself that had been violated. Ada stayed until we finished everything and ordered pizza for dinner, and having her there made the whole process feel less scary and more like I was just doing normal maintenance on my life. Later that evening, Hunter sat down with his phone and drafted a text message to Caitlin that said basically the same things as the cease and desist letter Joan had sent. He wrote that she wasn't allowed to contact me in any way, couldn't visit our home, and needed to stop trying to monitor or track us. He told her he loved her and always would because she's his sister, but that her behavior was completely unacceptable, and there had to be real consequences for what she'd done. I watched him type it and revise it a few times before finally sending it, and I could see how hard it was for him to set that boundary so firmly with someone he cared about. But seeing him actually do it and not make excuses or soften the message made me feel way more secure about our relationship and our future together. A whole week went by after that with absolutely no contact from Caitlin. Her Instagram and Facebook accounts went completely quiet with no new posts or stories, which was weird because she usually posted multiple times a day. I checked the building security app every morning, and there were no logged attempts of her trying to enter our building or even walking past the entrance. The silence felt almost eerie after months of her constant presence in our lives, and I caught myself being super hyper-vigilant about everything. I checked the door camera on my phone like 50 times a day and kept looking over my shoulder when I walked to my car or went to the store. But gradually, over those 7 days, I started to relax just a tiny bit, like maybe the boundaries were actually going to work, and I could start feeling safe again in my own life. At work, I scheduled a meeting with my supervisor and someone from HR to explain what had been going on. I told them I'd been dealing with a stalking situation involving my boyfriend's sister, but that it was now being handled through legal channels and family agreements. My supervisor was really understanding and didn't ask for a bunch of details that would have been embarrassing to share. HR adjusted my workload temporarily, so I had fewer tight deadlines while I was dealing with everything, and they moved my desk to a less visible spot in the office away from the windows and main entrance. Over the next few days, my work performance started to get better, because I wasn't constantly distracted by worrying about Caitlin showing up or watching me somehow. I actually finished a big project on time, and my supervisor complimented my work, which made me feel more like myself again instead of just a victim of someone else's obsession. During that same week, Hunter's mom texted asking if I wanted to meet her for coffee, and we met at this quiet place near her house. She immediately apologized again for not recognizing how serious Caitlin's behavior had become over the past few months. She explained that the family had kind of normalized a lot of Caitlin's boundary issues over the years because of her mental health struggles, making excuses for behavior that actually wasn't okay. She said seeing everything laid out as documented evidence with timestamps and forensics reports was a huge wake-up call for both her and Hunter's dad. She promised to stay in regular touch with me and support both me and Hunter through whatever came next with Caitlin's treatment and recovery. Having her say all that and really mean it made me feel less alone in this whole situation, like I had someone from his family actually on my side who understood what I'd been through. 2 weeks after the family meeting, Hunter told me he'd started seeing a therapist to work through his feelings about his sister and his own role in enabling her behavior for so long. He didn't make any big dramatic promises about becoming a completely different person overnight, but he shared some of what he was learning about healthy boundaries and complicated family dynamics. His therapist was helping him understand that protecting Caitlin from consequences had actually made things worse for everyone, including her. Hearing him take real responsibility for his part in how things got so bad and actively working on himself in therapy made me feel way more hopeful about our future together as a couple. One afternoon, I stopped at a coffee shop near my office to grab a latte before heading home. When the barista called out my order, I noticed she'd written Melanie in black marker on the cup. In the past, I would have just let it go and pretended not to notice because correcting people felt awkward and demanding. But this time, I walked back up to the counter and politely told her my name was actually Melanith, and asked if she could remake it with the correct spelling. She apologized right away, and made me a new drink with my real name written carefully on the cup. It was such a small thing that probably didn't matter to anyone else, but to me, it felt like reclaiming a piece of my identity that I'd let other people diminish for too long. My name was the only connection I had left to Guatemala and my heritage, and I wasn't going to let anyone erase it anymore, not even by accident. 3 weeks passed without any sign of Caitlin, and I started to feel like I could breathe normally again. Then one Tuesday evening, while Hunter and I were watching TV, his phone rang and I saw his mom's name on the screen. He answered on speaker and she got straight to the point. She told us that Caitlin had started seeing a therapist twice a week, and asked them to pass along that she was working on herself. His mom made it super clear this wasn't Caitlin asking for contact or forgiveness, just information she wanted us to know. The message coming through his parents instead of directly from Caitlin showed she was at least following the no contact boundary for now. Hunter thanked his mom and we hung up, and neither of us really knew what to say about it. A month after everything came out into the open, Hunter and I stood in our kitchen cooking pasta together. The door was locked with the new deadbolt, and the security camera by the entrance was recording like it always did now. As we chopped vegetables and stirred sauce, we talked honestly about everything we'd lost. Some of the easy trust was gone, some of the innocence about his family, some of the relaxed feeling we used to have in our own home, but we also talked about what we wanted to keep building together despite all the mess his sister had created. It wasn't some perfect happy ending where everything was magically fixed. It was just real life, with both of us choosing to keep trying and naming the hard stuff out loud instead of pretending it didn't exist. And that's the story with a little lesson tucked inside. I love when a simple moment reminds us how much we can still learn. If this gave you something new to think about, that's all I could ask for. Subscribe so you'll be ready for the next one.